Goodness, we've got quite the posse here. So whilst we're just waiting for Charlotte, let's go through the list and say hello to everybody, and feel free to unmute and say hello back. I suppose we need to start with ex Dumteedum royalty, Quentin Rayner. How are you today, sir? Q, Quentin. All right. Well, Quentin's decided to be shy. So let's start with the first person who was on the stream. How are you today, Bob? Are you in Texas, Bob?
Yeah, I'm in Texas. It's 5 a.m. here.
This is all good. Wait a minute. I've just realized I can't hear anybody. So here we go. There you go.
Well, I am in Texas. It's 5 a.m. here, bright and early.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate the commitment to the cause, Bob.
Oh, love the Archers.
Absolutely. So, Bob, welcome. Sandra Jenkinson.
Hello. Fine.
How are you?
Coffee.
You're fortified for the morning.
Yep.
Well done. And where exactly are you, Sandra?
Waterlooville.
You know what? As soon as I asked the question, I actually knew the answer. It's lovely to have. It's lovely to have you rep in Waterlooville. Nick Roworth, you old scoundrel. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, this week I shall mostly doing Zoom calls with Royfield and Claire.
Fantastic. Though I tell you what, though, we might have a bit of a change to the format on Saturday. Just warning you, Nick. Just warning you. The person has dropped out, and we're furiously trying to find somebody else. If we don't find somebody else, we'll just be playing games and chatting, I think. So Lillian McCarthy. Now you're up there in the northeast, aren't you, Lillian?
I am. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. I wasn't sure I'd be.
No, you're all properly connected, Lillian. Did you hear your wonderful singing at the end of last week's Dumteedum?
Oh, yes. Thanks for putting that on.
Oh, yes. No. It was wonderful, you know. So
thank you very much.
Let's big up one of our own.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. I wasn't sure whether it was going to be appropriate to share it because it wasn't really archer related as such, but I thought I'll just have a go, and if it gets removed, it gets removed.
No, listen, no, your family, so it was
family,
totally fine, totally fine.
Thank you very much.
Going through this
here now.
Pam. Oh, hello, Quentin.
Hello,
yes, you're here now. How are you, sir?
All right, I'm in. All right, thank you. I'm in beautiful Cornwall. There you go. You see the sea?
Very nice. Nice.
You see the sea? Yeah.
You know what? If you'd have said that was California, sun is shining. But if you'd have said that was California, I would not have disbelieved you, Quentin. Looks wonderful.
Maybe it is. No, I'm in Cornwall. I hope everybody's all right. Hello. Sorry. So you can hear me now. Good. I had problems.
We can hear you and can see you. Now, I'm starting to worry at 5 minutes past the hour that we don't have Charlotte, and I have sent her the link. Just bear with me, everybody. I'm going to quickly go on mute. Talk amongst yourselves. Let me just communicate with her and check that she's fine. 1 minute.
Is Philippa on, Quentin?
Hello, who's that?
Lillian.
I don't think she can make it. I don't think she can make it today. I did check with her, but she's a busy woman.
Yeah, she is, to be fair.
So she asked me to feed back to her what came out of this.
Oh, that'd be brilliant, yeah. And of course, I suppose she'll be able to catch it on YouTube, won't she?
Yes, it's going to be on. You're right. I'm actually. We're finally meeting up in the flesh in person on August the 31st. So,
lovely.
We're in Stratford. So at last we shall meet. So we shall.
I thought you'd already met and had fish and chips.
No, we've never met.
I thought you had fish and chips one time when you were hosting.
Well, we've eaten. We did Patreon videos where we ate various things, including pickled eggs.
Yeah.
Ouch. But so we've virtually eaten, but we haven't actually eaten, if that makes sense.
Physically met up. Yeah.
So I'm almost half tempted to go and see Richard III at the same time, because of course Arthur Hughes is doing it. But
of course, yeah. I was going to say, why don't you?
I've got a feeling we'll be yakking so much you'll miss it.
Shame.
We'll see. But it'd be nice to see her eventually. Yes, we'll probably be. Yeah. She'll probably run a mile and think, "My God, that's really him." Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't see why.
Yeah. So it's taken best part of 2 years to actually meet her. It's crazy, really.
No, it's mad, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Very good singing, by the way, Lillian. I was going to say.
Thank you. That's jolly kind.
I think it takes guts to stand up. I've always said that. It takes enormous guts to stand up and do a solo, I think.
Says he who worked for the BBC.
No, but I do. I think singing solo takes a lot of courage.
I just really enjoy it. I'm just the proverbial show-off.
Good for you.
I agree with Quentin here that I actually think that of all of the public performances you can give, singing is actually the most brave, because you can't hide at all, right? It is so much of that performance is innate. It's one thing to read out somebody else's words or a script, but to sing, you physically and emotionally are naked, so to speak. So
especially if you sing a cappella, because then you haven't even got a track.
There you go.
I think the equivalent is stand-up comedian as well. I think
yes, absolutely.
If they don't laugh, you know you've failed.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Just to break this up, good people. I am now at 9 minutes past the hour. I'm really starting to worry. I've sent her an email. Yeah. I have sent her the correct link. We have communicated this week. Admittedly, I don't have her mobile, but we have communicated via email, because I did try and move this to Friday at 7:30. I thought, wouldn't it be nice to do it after the Archers? But she's going to the proms. So, so we have had that level of communication. But just whilst we're all here, and as I know I've said this before, I'm so heartened to see so many people here, considering it's in the middle of a work day. But Pam, how are you, Pam? And where are you, Pam?
Fine. I'm in Silverdale on Morecambe Bay. The picture is not. I'm one of the Saturday Academic Archers gang, and Claire was promoting this, and so I thought I'd come.
Well,
being a retired layabout, so the working day. What's that? Yeah. Fortunate position.
Exactly.
Working day.
Exactly. Anne, painting. How are you, Anne? And where are you? You can unmute, Anne. It's allowed.
Oh, hello. I'm in Cheltenham.
You're in where? Sorry.
Cheltenham.
Cheltenham.
Yeah.
Do you work for GCHQ? Are you a spy? You a spook?
No, I don't. There's lots of people in Cheltenham who don't work in GCHQ, and I'm actually retired, so that's why I'm
all right.
Around. I thought I'd dip in and see what this is all about.
You're a little bit muffled there, but I got that you were retired, so you no longer work for Her Majesty's Secret Service. That's what I understood from what you just said.
Yeah, no, I was just saying there's a lot of people in Cheltenham who don't work for GCHQ.
Ah, okay. All right. Well, listen, welcome. Hello, Nick. How are you? Hello, Nick. Where are you today? Lovely T-shirt.
Oh, thank you. I'm in lovely Devon, near Tiverton, and I'm one of the academic archers.
Ooh, hello, academic archers person. My second holiday I can ever remember as a kid, we went to Torquay and we had a lovely day in Tiverton, aged 8. You probably saw me running around, my little brown knees in little short trousers.
Probably not, because I was still in Lincolnshire then. I was still with my webbed toes in the fens.
You're distorting a bit, Nick.
Sorry? You're
distorting a little bit. You might need to speak a little bit away from the mic.
Yeah, you are a little bit.
Okay, I'm on Bluetooth. I was probably still in the fens with my little webbed toes, doing my Fenland bit.
Gotcha. Quickly go through this. Mike Gunn, you're sporting a wonderful beard, sir. If only I could grow such a beard. How are you, mate? Oh, unmute yourself there, Mike.
Yeah, I'm in deepest Surrey.
Deepest Surrey? So,
well,
where is deep in Surrey?
Guildford.
Who did I see in Guildford? EMF, I think, or something, the 1990. Were you at that concert? Were you also raving away?
No, certainly not. No, no. I'm sort of I'm 60s and punk era, so I'm sort of.
Gotcha. So when you say you were a punk, did you go full punk? You know, Mohican, dyed hair.
No. I was living in London. I was living in London when punk got going, and you could go to lots of venues, pubs, and so that was that was as far as I got with popular music, more or less.
So the question is, though, Mike, are you an anarchist? Are you the Antichrist?
Yes. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
You are. Yeah. An anarchist.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. No, I'm right with them. Yeah. That was. I think that's the correct rendition of that song.
Indeed.
I must admit, I do love it. But I have good news, everybody.
Yeah.
Charlotte's with us. So let us all go on mute, other than Charlotte, and we're going to begin.
Are you going to mute us, or are we muting ourselves?
I trust you to mute yourself there.
Okay.
All right, smashing. Woof. Hello, everybody. I am beside myself with excitement because not only are we resurrecting the Zooms, the Dumteedum Zooms, but we have a proper guest of honor. Charlotte Higgins, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm super sorry for being late to this amazing party. I have to admit that I'm slightly flexibly working. What I'm trying to say is that this is a working day for me, and I'm just skipping out for a few minutes to speak to you guys. I'm slightly guilty, which is why I was late, because I was sort of embroiled.
Well, listen, no worries.
So very nice to see you all.
Listen, utterly no worries. What we did was we were just going around and having a little bit of a chat, just saying hello to everybody, seeing where they were. And actually, we a couple of years ago at the height of COVID, we made a real thing of this on a Friday instead of having the pleasure of listening to the Archers on a Friday. We did this kind of every week. We had all manner of actors on the show, and it was a wonderful thing. So I didn't think that anybody would actually turn up, but we do have 17 of us on this Zoom call, and we have even more actually on YouTube. So we have a right royal smorgasbord of Archers fanatics who've come to ask you some hard questions, Charlotte Higgins. So I hope you've got some in-depth answers for us.
I'll do my best.
Smashing.
Best. I very much admired your pronunciation of smorgasbord there.
Oh no! Listen, I grew up in Stockholm, so that's the south side of Stockholm pronunciation of smorgasbord.
Very good.
First off, you have taken over the mantle of this monthly Guardian Archers column from a legend How's it feel a year plus in? Are you filling her shoes adequately, or do you feel like, woof, these are some big shoes to fill?
No one's ever going to fill Nancy Banks-Smith's shoes adequately, and there are moments where I think, why did I do that? Because I did it on an absolute whim. Actually, I suggested it because, as you know, Roifield, because I interviewed you for it, I wrote a big piece for The Guardian, like a 5,000-word piece on the Archers and its cultural significance that went that was timed to the Archers' 70th birthday. And it was after that I felt like, I've been a lifelong listener to the Archers. I've now accumulated quite a lot of knowledge about the way the Archers is made. My obsession with the Archers is not only undiminished, but probably fueled by this experience. So on a complete whim, one day I just emailed the radio and TV editor at The Guardian and said, how about I do a month in Ambridge? And I did not think that's a really stupid thing to do, because basically one of the, say, 3 greatest writers The Guardian has ever employed invented that slot. So it was a really stupid thing to do. Anyway, and also when you fire off these emails, you actually expect them to be greeted by infinite silence. But in this case, I got a really quick response. That's a great idea. Let me just discuss it with blah. And then within a day or so, I got the gig. And then I thought, gosh, I've got to do it. And then I thought, gosh, Nancy. So I wrote Nancy an email. And I think the commissioning editor also wrote to Nancy. Obviously we wanted to be sure that Nancy herself was okay with this. And I got the most incredible email back from Nancy, which was, something to cut out and keep. And it was not only was it incredibly encouraging, but also it was written in pure Nancy Banks-Smith best prose, and just said, you should do it. Please yourself. No one else is going to do it for you. Just do it. And and she just gave me a shot to the arm, and I thought, well, if Nancy thinks it's okay, then it's okay. So I did it. But I think, in answer to your question about how does it feel a year and a bit on, I think it feels like I'm finding my way of doing it, which obviously is not the same as, or as good as Nancy. But the one thing, and I try not to look back at Nancy's old columns now, because I did read them all when I wrote my enormous piece about the Archers, but I don't look at them now and kind of weep with despair. But I do feel that the big thing that I take on from the way she did it is that just to pretend that it's real, just to treat the characters as if they're real, never to talk about the acting or the direction or the spot effects or the actors as such, or to talk about the script writers or the plot lines, just to treat it as if it's kind of reality radio. And I think that's such a nice way of handling it. It's such a fun way of doing it, and I see absolutely no reason to do it any differently. I think that was a sort of brilliant ploy of Nancy's, which I'm happy to carry on with. It makes it a lot of fun to write.
Why do you think that this column is essential Guardian reading? If you were to lay out all of the UK broadsheets, I'd have thought this would have sat in the Telegraph or the Express, as opposed to the Guardian. Why do you think it's become such a staple of the Guardian?
I don't know. I think it probably is Nancy, and I don't actually know I don't know the origin of it. I think it was when Nancy was winding down from other responsibilities, but this was a kind of lovely thing to do. And it was a monthly thing. But sometimes I think it's quite nice when the Guardian does something that doesn't feel terribly Guardianish, and sometimes those are the best things in the Guardian, when it's running slightly counterintuitive. That said, there are tons of, this column gets quite good numbers, given that it's about a single radio program on a single network that we know that quite a lot of people really hate. People do read it.
I beg your pardon.
Has got its audience.
I beg your pardon.
Well, sometimes you kind of want, I mean, unduly pessimistic because why would anyone read my stupid column about the Archers? But yeah, I mean, it does surprisingly well to me anyway, in terms of numbers of people who kind of read it. So clearly that there are a lot of Guardian reading Archers listeners, and in a way, why wouldn't there be? We're all listening, Guardian readers, Radio 4 listeners, quite a big crossover there. The middle classes. Why pretend otherwise? Why pretend otherwise?
How have you found the rabid partisan nature of Archers fandom? Because a lot of us do believe that this is our version of the Archers, and we can be quite vociferous about other people's interpretations, or the script writers, or some of the actors and whatever. So, some of us can be a little bit of a vicious bunch. How have you dealt with that, with people saying, "Oh, you're no Nancy Banks-Smith," or whatever, or what you said last week in your column, I completely disagree with?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a journalist for 25 years, and you kind of get to the point where you take that stuff on the chin, and I'm well aware, I also feel very strongly about certain things in the Archers. I understand that people have very strong feelings, and I've dipped in and out of the Facebook groups, and I know the sort of things that people say. Generally, I just think this is completely brilliant, because people are so creative and so interesting in what they in what they pick out of the storylines, and the kind of analysis they have of different. I mean, there's a certain amount of rough and tumble. Let's say, as you say, passions can rise quite fiercely. But in general, I'm amazed at the sort of perspicacity that people bring to bear on what is, after all, only a soap opera. Not really.
It's the soap, the oldest in the world. It's the soap.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the things which I really wanted to talk to you about is what I kind of perceive to be this kind of passing of the baton. It seems to me that in the last year, we have a whole load of younger characters, and what's really significant for me is that these aren't necessarily solid middle class Waitrose sandwich eating young folk. We have the cases. Obviously, we have Brad and George now, etc. What says you, Charlotte, about this? All these new characters which have come in, which a lot of them don't even have receiver pronunciation accents. The cases are outbrumming me even.
The case. I know, it's good. I think it's good. Is it good? I don't know. I mean, in a way, part of the joy of the Nancy Banks-Smith technique, let's call it, is it's just accepting what comes in a way, and not being heavily critical, oddly, if you can understand that. So I don't have kind of strong prescriptions in my mind about what the screenwriters, the script writers should or shouldn't do. In a way, I just I'm fascinated by it, and kind of accept what comes. I do think the rise of the House of Horror is, clearly the big the big slow burn arc, and I'm quite interested in that the idea that what for most of my lifetime were the unspeakable, you could not, this Horrobins were unspeakable as a family clan. They were the lowest of the low. They were the lumpen proletariat, basically, of Ambridge, and their rise to prominence it amuses me greatly. I kind of revel in this, actually. I know there are lots of people who feel like if I never heard from another Horrobin, that would be fine. You know, this is all a bit ridiculous. But I quite like this slow motion Marxist revolution, and I quite like the way the rise of the Horrobins, at least in you know, it seems to have softened a bit in the last month or so, but at least for a time seemed to be being balanced by the absolute cataclysmic fall of the house of Aldridge, exactly. But then they seem to have pulled themselves back from the brink, sadly. So yeah, and yeah, I'm kind of into I'm into George and Brad. I thought I was really properly gripped by the George and Brad interchanges while they were haymaking, because I thought, actually, yeah, we sort of need an unpleasantly manipulative, nasty character who's just gonna chuck a spanner into the works, and you know, really kind of mess things up a bit for people. And I thought, yeah, bring it, George, you horrible little piece of work.
Well, you know, absolutely. And considering that I always say that I love episodes of The Archers when nothing happens. Just give me people just talking about nothing and I'm just happy for 12 minutes. The more I sit down and realize it, that actually it always does need a villain, doesn't it? It does need a Matt Crawford or a Greg or just someone who's just thoroughly unpleasant. And it seems to help kind of crystallize things. You know, we do need a baddie. And to start off with a baddie so young, I think is kind of unprecedented, really. Generally, the baddies float in fully formed as a bit of a wrong one, like a Matt Crawford. We didn't.
Well, yes, I suppose you've got Roy. You've got racist Roy, and usually, I suppose, in my mind, I think, well, you know, in the Archers, usually these bad characters are at least halfway redeemed. So, you know, is George going to have a rather tedious arc of, you know, becoming a nice person in about 5 years' time? Who knows? I mean, no, I can see some shakings of the head from fellow participants in the session. So yes, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I do think also the Horrobins for me is giving us some really, I mean, maybe a lot of us don't want to think about the cost of living crisis on the Archers because we've got enough of it in our own lives. Thank you very much. However, I do think from the point of view of actually engaging in at least lightly in the real world, it is kind of I quite like it that this is getting horribly real for Tracy, and the cost of living crisis is being reflected even in the Sutton uplands of Lakey Hill.
Absolutely, and I don't know whether obviously, because the Horrobins, as you rightly say, were always the low to the low, you know, much lower than the Grundys. The Grundys looked down at the Horrobins, and hence one of Susan's kind of story arcs was always the fact that she tried to distance herself away from a Horrobin forebears and a wider family. How do you think that let's say the cases, I know you said you're kind of just living in the moment type of thing, but there has to be some direction for the cases. What do you think that possibly might actually be?
Yeah, it's extremely hard to tell, isn't it? I mean, they're just floating around becoming, I mean, in a way it seems a bit trivial at the moment, doesn't it? That this kind of minor plot line about the Steph Bess Ben thing. Sorry, I always have to include Bess in this because,
well, I did like that line that
all the same sounding name. It's ridiculous. Beth, Ben, Bess, and Seth. In fact, to the extent that when I first wrote about these Casey girls, I got them mixed up, and I had to run a wretched correction in the paper because I'd misheard Steph for Beth, or you know, annoying me greatly. Yeah, it's I'm finding it hard to figure out what function they're going to provide long term. I mean, I do think, you know, Vince is a sort of self-made entrepreneur. I suppose, you know, the whole the abattoir is quite, he's a Brummie, which of course, you know, I think that is, as you say, that's really important. The Archers is made in Birmingham, and, you know, please can we have a proper Brummie character? Yes, here's a proper Brummie character. The abattoir, of course, is quite an, you know, it's an interesting fact of farming life. But I thought Vince showed promise at one point because he was so interested in art. And I thought, oh my goodness, maybe Vince is like a secret aesthete, an incredible art collector. Do you remember? I mean, it was ages ago now, but he and Russ had a kind of moment in the Putative, I think, art gallery in Lower Loxley, and
Basquiat, yes. They were talking, and he knew Basquiat,
He had views. He had like interesting sounding views on art. This hasn't been picked up at all. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? I just feel that they're sort of bumbling around, and it was, you know, again, the sort of idea that Vince might be a bad un, but he was sort of softened into actually, you know, a bit of a rough diamond, but actually, you know, he's made lots of mistakes in his life, has spoiled his daughters, thinks that problems can be solved with money. But actually, deep down, he's a bit of a sweetie, and it's all and, you know, he's no Nigel, but kind of thing. He'll make Elizabeth happy, but
I just thought, well, when he first came in, well, this is very obviously Jack Woolley Mark II. The fact that, and obviously he's been an enabler for his one daughter in terms of a bad behaviour. But he did turn around 2-3 weeks ago, didn't he? And actually say, no, I'm going to stop indulging you, etc. But I think it's really interesting when you speak to people like Kerry Davis, you realise that when a new character comes into the Archers, for the most part, they have no idea where they're going to go. They just kind of make it up slightly as they go along. I think they set in place some level of parameters that they're going to interact with this person, that person. But then it depends very much on serendipity, but then also how well that actor actually does in that role. And they say, oh, we need more of them. Then they create this supporting cast, you know. And so Tracy Horrobin coming back into it, it was because of the popularity of Susie Reed's the actor, you know, because, you know, they didn't think they were going to build a whole family kind of around her. You know, that's just come over time because they need to cement her as an essential part of Ambridge. But right now, we do have, and I keep saying this, but I'm so blooming heartened that we have so many of you on this, considering it's in the middle of the workday. You've had enough of me. You hear me on the podcast every week. So why don't we throw this open for questions? Quentin Rayner, you knew exactly where I was going with this. You were muted when I was in mid flow, knowing I was going to hand the mic over. So why don't you pose a question, Quentin? Go for it.
Hi there. Thanks for joining us this morning for your insight. I've got lots to ask you actually, but I just want to pick up on the fact that you say that you just take it as real and it's actually a real village with real characters. But when you're writing your column, how on earth do you resist not putting the boot into some really stupid plot lines? Because, I mean, if you've read the tweet along, as you say, you read Facebook posts, it drives us nuts. And we've had a real gamut of them recently, haven't we? We've had the Walrus story with Lillian, and we had the Easter Bunny that went on for far too long, and then we had Steph and that ridiculous party. And how do you resist not putting the boot in?
Quentin, there are ways of doing it. I feel that I feel that there are times when my irritation does show, but it shows through this kind of lens of as if it's real. I did once let slip actually and said it's been a really bad month or something, and I got actually readers didn't like that at all, and I thought I got sort of cross with it. And let slip the kind of illusion that it was real slightly, and readers didn't like it, and I thought, no, okay, I didn't like it either. I didn't think it worked as well. So, but yes, I do find ways of I hope showing my irritation. Yeah. I mean, as you say, I I'm not sure the Archers is in its best phase at the moment, I have to say. You know, I agree. I think there's been some pretty ropey stuff. Yeah. And I'm probably more or less on the same page as you with some of those little plot lines. We hope for better days.
We do. But in that sense, do you think it's transitional? I mean, do you think these annoying plot lines, the introduction of a lot of new characters who are young, do you think the editorial team is thinking we need to refresh? June Spencer, bless her cotton socks, is 103. They're all getting older, aren't they? Do you think we are in that transitional phase and we're just going to have to get used to these new characters and just accommodate them bit by bit?
Yeah, I imagine so. I feel like we are in need of a good slow burn, sort of slightly nail-bitey plot line. I mean, we've had the Chris and Alice plot seems to have, unless there's going to be an enormous disaster, feels like it's sort of calming down now. The Grey Gables is hardly going to have us, switching on the radio with, kind of with the whites of our eyes, chewing our nails, although it is sort of interesting. They seem to be turning it. I always thought they should turn it into the Pig. I don't know. Have you ever? It's a kind of posh chain of hotels and country locations where they have.
Yes, I've been to one. I went to one the other day up at Harlem. Yes.
But they have their own. They have their own vegetable gardens, and they only source produce from a 25-mile radius. Very modern. I thought, But anyway,
that's a really good idea. They're doing great business down here. I tell you. I'll give the floor to somebody else in a minute. But I presented Dumteedum for quite a while with Philippa Hall, and I have to ask you. I scripted a pull together of the week for each Dumteedum, and that was hard enough. Just subbing a whole week's worth of the Archers into a script. Now, how on earth do you go about subbing a month's worth into one column? How do you go about it?
Well, I have to say it's really changed my listening habits, because I used to in real life, normal non-professional life, I would. I'd listen to the Archers, but I wasn't fanatically attached to listening to every single episode. So if I wasn't in at 7 p.m. Or hadn't managed to catch the omnibus, if I missed the odd one, that was fine. That's the whole joy of the Archers, right? Even, in fact, years can elapse and you can still tap in. So missing the odd episode is never an issue. Sure. These days, of course, it really feels like I've got to be on top of every episode. I cannot miss a moment. So I've changed. I've become a person who I sort of dip in and out, and then the weekend before my deadline, I go on a long walk. I'll go on 2 long walks and listen to all the omnibus. While I'm walking on my phone, and while I'm walking, if I hear something kind of funny or that I feel like I could run with or interests me, I just make a quick note on my phone, and and I do it like that. But I mean, my job is different from your job, because when you were doing that, I felt that you had to cover the bases, whereas I don't really have to cover the bases. I get to pick out stuff that is interesting to me, or particular, it feels like there might be a couple of jokes in it.
So it's light touch across the whole terrain, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah. So I'm listening out for kind of moments where I think that's really great, or that's really funny, or that's really embarrassing.
But you have to you're right, Charlotte. You have to get it right, because this lot know their artists, don't they?
Oh yes,
you can't get it wrong.
Yeah, and I do get it wrong. Of course, I get it wrong, because my memory is fallible. There are things that I've made some really some absolute. I invented a car. I don't know why I did this really, but I invented a car for Jim. It just had passed me by that Jim owned a very famously important car, And of course, 27,000 Archers listeners wrote to me and said, how could you possibly not know that, Jim has this very important Riley? And so, correction. In fact, I wrote it. I know.
I feel your pain. I feel your pain. I've made mistakes as well. They tick you off very nicely. I found though. It's always very polite.
It's lovely, and I'm a person who's very happy to be. I hate error, so I'm always the person who's much happier to get it corrected immediately than sort of drag around an error.
One more question. Do you agree with me that the definition of an Archer's listener, frankly, is somebody who spends 98% of their time tearing their hair out, is just absolutely infuriated and annoyed by this wretched program, but there's that 2%, the nuggets that keeps you going? Do you think that is the definition of a true Archer's listener?
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up in my household, in the 80s in Stoke-on-Trent, the Archers represented a few minutes of calm when the family didn't have to have an argument with each other. Usually we listened to it while eating supper, so the sort of truce was called. But also a great feature, my family were very anti-Susan Carter, and so when there was they were all horrid. I mean, this is a kind of one step on from what you're saying. When Susan went to prison, my family were very angry with all the Archers fans who thought it was wrong that she should go to prison. And there was a sort of mini household crusade that the key should be forthwith thrown away and that Susan should rot in prison for the rest of her life. So, yes, this irritation takes many different strange forms as well. But yeah, no, it's all lots of fun. I can see these great chat stuff on the chat that everyone's pointing out about Vince, quite rightly, that Vince was sort of introduced to be an irritant and a challenge to David, which of course is a strong point.
Mm.
Thank you, Charlotte. Anyway, thank you very much, Charlotte. Thank you.
Absolutely. Right. If you've got a question, now is the time to unmute. And whilst you're A, thinking of your question, B, struggling with the unmute function, there is a question which I have from R. Stephen Bowden, who is a good denizen of Dumteedum. His question, quite simply, Charlotte, is how comes your columns don't go up on the website as soon as other kind of feature pieces? Why does he have to wait days? Because he says it's frustrating him.
It's annoying, isn't it? It's to do with, and I'm no expert on this, but it is to do with the fact that The Guardian publishes a huge amount of material on a Saturday, and yet Saturday is our lowest web reading day. And so according to those people of my colleagues who know about this stuff, which is not me, it is sort of somehow better. Things get read more if the publication is staggered, and for that reason it's the same. For example, this is the one I find especially annoying, is that the recipes aren't published online until the following week, which is annoying if I have forgotten to buy a paper but really want to know what Rachel Roddy has written about that week. So I share your feelings of frustration, and that is broadly the explanation. Please don't ask me to defend it, because I'm a mere onlooker in this. It's as it were not my decision.
Well, that completely pans out with podcast downloads, that you want to upload a podcast on a Sunday night so people listen to it actually on a Monday on their commute to work. That's a well-known thing. And when I used to run myvillage.com, web stats collapsed at the weekend. That actually it's kind of counterintuitive. You'd think that everybody surfs at the weekend, but actually they surf during work days and work hours and then at the early evening. But anyway, Mike Gunn, you're unmuted. You've held your finger up not once but twice, sir. Ask your question.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to put a point to Charlotte about The Guardian, which is that I see The Guardian as part of a natural constituency of listeners. When the message board was, the BBC set up its message board over 20 years ago, the first thing I'd say is that it was very funny. Everybody really found the Archers very amusing and funny and made lots of witty comments. But it also came out in the wider discussions that took place that about 90% of the people on the original message board were actually Guardian readers. It was possible that there was just, a majority of Guardian readers and the other people were frightened to speak up and say they read other papers. But I think you can look at the Archers as a sort of rather amusing critique of British society. And I think that's why I think it works on that level a great deal of the time. The other point I would make is that is about characters, that they bring in new characters and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And the type of character that they're actually lacking at present, which I think George may turn into, is the lovable rogue, the person who is basically a bit unscrupulous and dishonest. You can't help liking them. I know that not everybody liked Walter Gabriel or not everybody liked Joe Grundy, but for me, they're the really great characters that when they come on and they do something a bit dodgy, that's what I really enjoy. The rest of the Archers and so on I could do without, but that's the bit which I really enjoy. I'd be interested in your reaction to that.
Yeah, I think that is that's a really terrific point. And to your first point, that's very interesting too. I also wonder about the crossover between people who were willing to use message boards in the sort of early days of message boards and Guardian readers, because I think Guardian readers somehow probably more tech savvy than Telegraph readers. It's slightly more urban media savvy, the Guardian very early on its website, all of that. But yeah, point taken completely. That's really good to know. And the lovable rogue thing, yeah, I suppose when you put it in those terms, it does feel like that's quite the sort of George's character, if you put it like that, he becomes a chip off the old block, doesn't he, in a really interesting way. And I like it when you can feel the history and heritage of the Guardian sort of coming through into the present. And yeah, he's going, because Eddie's not a lovable rogue anymore, he's just lovable. He's sort of ceased, actually he's become a rogue. But he definitely was in the 80s. As you say, his grandfather, George's great grandfather, was certainly a roguish person. Someone's saying, could George turn into a character like Jazza has become? It's true. I think there's a huge. I think it seems to me like the Archers does get tempted into softening its rogue. So Jazza was a bit roguish, wasn't he? Now Jazza is now like the moral core of the Archers in this highly unlikely way, along with the rest of the Horrobin Jazza kind of confederation. But yeah, Pam on chat is saying there's a nastiness to George and no lovability. I do think that so far that I haven't seen much redeeming features. Setting fire to the post box, I have to admit, because I've been away and not listening every day, I'm relying on my massive catch up. So I haven't heard it. I haven't heard every single episode since the setting fire to the post box. Was that him being, presumably that was him, was it him?
Oh yes. Well, it was
doing them a favor, or was it sort of was there any lovability to setting fire?
It wasn't made absolutely explicit, but I think you join up the dots and it's too much of a coincidence that the thing caught fire and he was in the vicinity and so on, and he mentioned lighter fuel. So
Carrie found lighter fuel in his hoodie.
Yeah.
So I suppose the charitable interpretation to that would be he had found a way of helping Clary and Susan out of this difficulty when Susan, it was an unbelievably stupid, actually, I thought, plot line that Susan would be kind of blackmailing stalwart of the WI around. I mean, I just thought that was ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the thing is that destroying, setting fire to Her Majesty's Mail is obviously a crime, but it's not the worst crime in the world. There are people who do much worse things, I think, and, much worse crimes. So I regard that as, kind of, I can tolerate that in a way.
Mm.
Probably
quite like this, by the way. Peggy guessing nasty with age is coming up on the chat, which I think is a brilliant point. Like, when is the village going to rise up against Peggy? You've just given me a wonderful, wonderful image of everybody, with pitchforks, turning on this, ancient woman and her evil cat. And she has just done a very unpleasant thing. It's true. What a ridiculous thing to do with a wretched stained glass window. Yeah. Honestly,
true that. Now, let's go just for another 8 minutes, good people. So if you have a question within you, let the question be free. Put it out into the ether. Unmute yourself and go for it.
Hi, Charlotte. It's Lillian McCarthy here from Middlesbrough. Can you hear me?
There. I can.
Hello
Hi
there.
there. Nice to meet you.
Hello there. Hi. I'm just wondering, I've got two questions for you, if I may. The first one was getting back to Vince. I had a theory that the reason he was so desperate to lend that money to David and Ruth for the solar panels was because he knows that he has some sort of terminal illness and he's not going to be able to spend that money. What are your feelings about that?
My feelings are, whoa, that had never crossed my mind. That is so interesting. Let's wait and see what happens. Okay, yeah, I hadn't thought of that at all, Lillian.
Well, it was just so insistent, and what made me think about it was when David finally agreed to accept it was a great big hug, which seems quite extreme for such a kind of male man, if you like, as Vince, to actually give somebody a hug.
Yeah, but I bet it was one of those
if
big
that makes any sense.
Like,
yeah,
he's
like yeah.
And
then my other sorry. Yeah, sorry. And
okay.
Then my
time will tell on that one. Yeah, I want to know more of your thing.
Okay. My other question, and probably one that everybody's wanting to know, is: are you finding it really annoying that they're not telling us who the new owner is of Grey Gables? And when they asked all the questions, they had the meeting, nobody actually asked that question, and you're not turning around and telling me that the people of Ambridge don't want to know. We think on our WhatsApp Sunday Archers group, we think it's Hazel.
Oh my God, that's so good. That's very clever. That's very clever. I personally think that's much more plausible than Vince has got a terminal illness, although I'm ready to be proved wrong on that. That's so clever. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it is bizarre. I completely agree that it's totally bizarre and strange that this new owner thing is shrouded in secrecy and it's total nonsense. Yes, I like it.
Yeah.
See what happens. Who else is alive? Matt Crawford.
Thank you so much for that.
It would also, be a way of honouring Jack, wouldn't it? Her dad. So it would make complete and utter sense.
Hasn't she got a terminal illness though, or she just got long COVID?
That question's aimed at me, so it's aimed at the wrong person. Anybody feel free to unmute and answer that.
She wasn't very well, was she? But I think.
Yeah, it was long COVID.
Yeah, she's had COVID.
Okay, so she's not.
Yeah,
she came shuffling into Ambridge and had to be helped by Peggy and Kate, didn't she?
Right.
Although some people thought she was putting it on.
Yes.
5 minutes, good people. So 5 minutes. Get your questions in. It's not every day you have the Guardian's foremost Archers writer right in front of you, ready and primed.
Guardian Archers writer, I think. So I'll take that. I am the foremost Guardian Archers.
You are the foremost. You are the foremost.
Yeah, I'm the foremost.
I thought they were a Merseyside pop group. Sorry. I thought the foremost were a Merseyside pop group.
Absolutely. So what? How long have you actually been working for The Guardian?
25 years. Since 1997, since just shortly after Tony Blair became Prime Minister. I know, you wouldn't be able to believe it, would you? I was a child.
You were one of Blair's babes then, were you?
Please no.
And because I must admit, right, I just kind of know you from doing the article. Obviously, I did know you before, but like, what exactly is your role as a journalist at the Archers? Because you did a thing about the Commonwealth Games opening and stuff. Are you the cultural writer? What exactly is your hat that you wear at the Guardian?
I'm chief culture writer. I do, but that doesn't mean that I have lots of other smaller culture writers working for me. That's just my ridiculous
Are you
title.
the foremost culture writer then? Is that what you're saying?
No comment. I wouldn't ever describe it that way, but let's put it that way. I've got lots of amazing colleagues. I've just started writing a regular cultural column on the op-ed pages, of which you talk about a piece that I wrote about the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games 10 years on. That was one of those columns which has just started. I write features for the arts pages. I write book reviews. And I perhaps most onerously in a way, I write articles for the long read section, which is my big piece on the Archers was an article for the long read. So I write for different parts of the paper. Everything that I do is broadly about culture. I mean, culture taken in quite a broad sense, which is why it includes things like the Olympics and quite a lot of, I bring sort of politics into things where it seems like a good idea, particularly on the op-ed pages.
How excited were you, Charlotte? How excited were you? Charlotte, how excited were you the other day when Susan made a reference to cancel culture? You must have fallen off your chair.
Yeah, it's quite funny, isn't it, when the sort of motifs of real contemporary life wander into the Archers. And part of me just wants to say, there's one place that I could really do without the culture wars, and that is Ambridge.
We've got a question here from Bob Flood. I noticed in the chats picks up on a point some of us have been making. Do you believe the younger characters are attracting younger listeners to the Archers?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, how would that even work? Do you know what I mean?
You mean if they're not listening in the first place? Yeah.
Yes.
But actually, there are a lot younger.
Strong plot lines attract listeners to the Archers, actually, don't they? I mean, I think Rob Helen attracted listeners to the Archers, but I don't think the fact of having a 16. I mean, maybe if it's on in the background and you're a kid, and you hear stuff like, Brad's anxieties about going to university or having enough money, or maybe that does. I mean, it's bound to have some effect, but I don't see it sort of revolutionizing the listener base of the Archers anytime soon.
There was an article recently, you probably saw it. Jeremy Howe was quoted as saying that actually the demographic that's increasing in terms of Archers listenership are the younger audiences, and that's because it's tied into the whole podcast culture. And he called it didn't he call it the new rock and roll? The Archers is the new rock and roll. But the younger demographic, the sort of 28 to 35, is increasing.
Yeah, and as you say, that I'm sure that's to do with podcast culture, and it's a whole different world. It's a whole different world out there, and that's really great. Yes. As to whether the Archers is the new rock and roll, Jeremy is a person who often speaks with gentle irony.
I think he was. But do you think just pick up on Bob's point, do you think these younger stories will retain those younger listeners who appear to be gravitating to the Archers.
What I definitely think is that the Archers as a long form drama that exists in real time can only renew itself by renewing its characters and keeping this cycle in motion where, you know, people are born, people reach the age of 16 and miraculously start to speak, and people die, you know, because it's like life. So, you know, in that sense, it has to, and I like it. I mean, I suppose the one young character that I think has seriously gone off the rails through no fault of his own, but I do think is sort of rather oddly written at the moment, is Rory and his career as a. I mean, what? Yeah. I mean, I do think that's seriously deranged. That this middle-aged executive would be wanting to pay Rory for. I mean, it's just no.
For company, I think it is. It's for company, isn't it?
For company, I know, but I mean, I can think I've got a couple of. I mean, there are a couple of 18-year-old boys that I really, you know, friends with my children, who I just think are absolutely spectacularly brilliant people. But you know, would you really pay an 18-year-old to kind of accompany you to corporate events?
Yeah. And nobody asked any questions either. It's extraordinary. Isn't it?
Exactly.
How does she introduce him at these corporate events?
Maybe it's my nephew. Maybe it's like that. Maybe it's like a sort of, you know, Renaissance Pope.
You know, I said as much on Dumteedum a couple of months ago, and was derided on the Twitters. I was called ageist and all manner of things. If it was purely a traditional escort service which he was providing, which was given a little bit of a housey father, well, then it makes complete and utter sense. He's a young man in the prime of his life and whatever, blah blah blah. But yeah, it makes no sense for her to take him to corporate events as whatever the heck he is. But on the note, though, that you talked about the Archers renewing the cycle of life, you know, births, marriages, deaths, and whatever. I think this recording has probably come to a fitting end as well. Right. So I'd like to thank you, Charlotte Higgins, for being with us. And we'll have to do this again. Can we do this again?
I'd absolutely love to. I'm only sorry that I was a little bit late coming on, but I would absolutely love to. It's been a real joy. Also, I can steal your ideas for my next column, which will absolutely excellent. It's really nice to talk about the Archers, man. I don't talk about it with other people enough. This is great.
Listen, we'll do this a couple of times a year. You can come on here, pilfer all of our great insights, and then pass them off as your own.
Exactly, uncredited.
But everybody, thank you for, I was going to say, taking time out of your work day, but most of you said you retired anyway. You know, there's Shannon shaking and saying, I don't work. You know, but it's really good to see so many of you. As I said at the start, you know, we haven't done this for quite some time. We're going to resurrect this, but maybe move it back to its traditional slot on a Friday. Maybe doing it at 7:30 after the Archers. Do it once a month. It's just a great way for us all to get together, talk about the Archers with somebody who is kind of like key to the Archers, whether it's a writer like Charlotte or maybe one of the actors on the show. So on that note, I'm going to say tatty bye to Arabit. And Charlotte, just tell us what you're actually working on at the moment. Tell us where people can find you on social media, etc., and then we'll properly say arrivederci.
Okay, on Twiggy. On Twitter, I'm at Chiggy. And at the moment, I'm working on some very serious-minded op-ed pieces about, you know, politics and arts funding and stuff like that. Yeah. Serious.
Fab. All right. Well, there you go. Follow Chiggy.
Also, I've written a very funny piece that's coming out, I think, on Tuesday. I think it's funny, about the way one of my books has been adapted into a rom-com, which is a rom-com play thing that's being staged in Scotland next week. So I've been having a lot of fun with that. Anyway, there you go.
There you go. All right, folks, don't forget, if you don't do so already, listen to the podcast. And I'm referring to the Dumteedum podcast because I'm taking it as granted you listen to the Archers either live or in podcast format. Ta-ta for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.